Hey guys, what's up? Alex Scott here with Consordini.com. Thank you guys so much for checking out another one of our videos. Today I'm going to do another one of these little kind of vlog style, just talking about some things that I get asked about by a lot of young and up and coming producers, engineers, that kind of a thing. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about is something that seems really, really simple on the surface, but I think is grossly misunderstood and not used correctly by a lot of, again, up-and-coming producers or new producers, new engineers, that kind of a thing. And that is EQ, equalization. Now, EQ, obviously, I mean, you're probably watching this right now going, oh, well, EQ is easy. Everybody knows how to use EQ. And on the surface, yes, I agree with that. But really, EQ can do some really, really wonderful things for sound, and it can also do some really not so wonderful things for sound. And you do need to understand a little bit about the technical variations and kind of the technical side of EQing things in order to really use it to its fullest potential. So obviously EQ is just, taking whatever your signal is, whether it's a whole mix or an individual element, and looking at the low frequencies, the mid frequencies, and the high frequencies, and adjusting them accordingly, making them louder or making them quieter. And that's really all there is to it on the surface, but I will get sessions from people where I'm either helping them with a mix or they've sent me something in Pro Tools or in Studio One where they've already mixed it a little bit and asked me to, critique it or tweak it or what have you. And the first thing that I see that I want all guys to be aware of is just the simple idea of over-EQing, okay? Now, again, EQs are incredibly useful tools. EQs can do a lot. EQs can do a lot to save a sound that was recorded really poorly, all that kind of stuff. But when I open a session and I look and I see stuff where somebody is, they're adding 20 dB on an EQ or taking away 20 dB on an EQ, there's a really good chance that you don't need to do that. Or I'll see guys where they've taken, their lows and they're boosting it by 10, and then their low mids and that's boosted by 12, and then their mids are boosted by 8 and their top end is boosted by 15. And they've, you look at the actual curve of the EQ, and if this is your zero line, the whole thing has been pushed up and you're basically just making it louder. There might be a little bit of sculpting going on, but you've added so much where they're like, oh, I'll add some low end. Now that sounds out of balance, so add some top end. Well, now my mids are missing, so add a bunch of mid back. All you're effectively doing is raising the gain of your sound, which you can do by just pushing your fader up, or adding more input gain at your source, or turning the region in your DAW up. You're just making it louder. But the problem is that when you make something louder using an EQ like that, because the EQ is amplifying different bands and there are crossover points, you get some really unusual things going on that actually make it sound worse. If you take an EQ and you set your band points to where your low and your mid and your high are all covering from 20 to 20. Let's say your low EQ is a shelf from 20 hertz up to 200 hertz, and then your mid EQ is from 200 to 5K, and then your treble is 5K up to 20K. And you take all those and you add 10 dB. You're basically taking your sound, splitting it into 3 different parts, using 3 different amplifiers, and then it's all going to come out the other end just louder. It's not really EQ'd, it's just louder. And because the EQ is separating up into those different bands and they're being recombined, that's not as clean as just adding gain. You're going to get what they call phase shift, which, without getting too technical, is basically just when EQ starts pushing frequencies and pulling frequencies, it can cause some phasing issues with the harmonics of the signal. It's kind of complicated to explain, but it sounds bad is the ultimate point. Now, if you have really high-end EQs, like mastering EQs, you're going to run into less of that. But still, if you're finding yourself adding low end and then adding top end and then your middle's missing, and so you add middle to compensate, that's not what you want to do. You want to think about what the sound really needs. And, and sometimes it's a little bit counterintuitive, like with the kick drum. You don't necessarily want to go adding a ton of 60 hertz to a kick drum. You certainly can. You can add a little bit and that will add more low-end thump to it. But I see these guys where they just keep boosting and boosting at like 40 or 50 hertz and they go, well, I still can't hear my kick. The presence in a kick drum is actually in the mid-range. It's actually anywhere from up around, 600, 800, up even into the low K hertz. That's where the mid-range thump and presence in your mix is going to come for your kick drum. So if you're having problems getting an element like that to stand out, just boosting the bass more and more and more isn't necessarily what you're looking for. So always think about not just, at first glance, it'll be easy to say, yeah, add low end to a kick drum. But experiment, try different things. Try boosting in the mid, see if that helps. Just because a sound is associated with low frequencies doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only thing that you can boost or cut to do anything with the signal. Same with the bass guitar. I see guys who go in and they'll boost 80 or 100 on a bass guitar with a little bell curve. That's great until you realize that suddenly, all of the notes that the bass player is playing, those are all the fundamental frequencies of those notes. The lowest A on a bass is 110 hertz. So if you're boosting at 100, that 110 hertz A, or the G sharp beneath it, or the A sharp above it, those notes are certainly going to stand out way more than like an open E below it, which is down around 30, 40 hertz, something like that. So suddenly you're messing with the volume of the actual notes the player is playing. So if your bass needs to stand out more in the mix, again, do stuff in the mid-range. That's going to bring out a little bit of the finger noise and a little bit of the attack. Just stuff that's can be a little bit counterintuitive, I think, but with practice and experience, people will learn these things. Another thing that I see people not doing with their EQs that they should be doing is high passing. So everything in your mix, vocal, acoustic guitar, electric guitar, keyboards, percussion, you should take and put a high pass filter on it and move it all the way up to where it's not directly interfering with the tone or timbre of the instrument. But if you point an acoustic guitar point a microphone rather at an acoustic guitar in a room, and you've got some air movement in that room, you're going to get a whole lot of 20 and 30 and 40 hertz rumble that you don't necessarily hear. But when you start adding up a couple of acoustic parts and then a couple of electric parts with the same problem, and then maybe a piano that you've mic'd and that has the same problem, and then you've got a vocal, you suddenly have all this buildup in 20 and 30 hertz that you're not hearing, but all it's going to do is make your low end muddy, right? It's just going to interfere with your kick and interfere with your bass. So make sure that you're high passing to do all of that stuff. And, again, I'm not going to cover everything in about EQ in this video. There's a million good resources out there on the web and around where you guys can learn about some of these more defined tips and tricks. I just wanted to talk about a couple of these points to make guys check themselves a little bit and make sure that you're really thinking when you're using a tool, And also, some things don't need to be EQ'd. If you feel like you're adding EQ just for the sake of it, you probably don't need to. Also, if you find yourself, just to get a usable sound, adding 20 dB of a frequency, check your miking, check your mic, check your instrument. I've seen people record an acoustic guitar and then suddenly they're adding all this top end and it gets hissy and it gets weird. And I look at them and go, well, why don't you change your strings? And they realize that they've been playing the same set of strings for 2 years and the instrument sounds completely flat and dead, and they put a new set of strings on it and boom, there you go. There's all your top end that you thought was missing. So yeah, just, encouraging you guys to think a little bit more critically about the tools that you're using. But what do you guys think about EQ? How do you use it? How do you approach it? Do you have any cool tips or tricks you'd like to share? Definitely leave them in the comments down below. We'd really appreciate hearing from you. Again, my name is Alex Scott with Consordini. Hope you found this video helpful, and thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.